Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Welcome to Gita Nagari and welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. Thank you, devotees, for joining us. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you, Tarika Prabhu. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, chapter 14, entitled King Chitraketu's Lamentation. Today we're doing text number 27 to 29. 27 and 28 don't have a purport, and 29 does. So I'll quickly read 27 and 28, and then we can do the recitation together for 29. Some formalities. Okay. There you go. Something happened there. Excuse me. So text 27. Sri Sukho Vacha. Iti artita sa Bhagavan Kripalur Brahmana Sutta Srapayitva Charum Vastram Tvastaram Ayayad Vibhu. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. In response to the request of Maharaj Chitraketu, Angira Rishi, who was born of Lord Brahma's mind, was very merciful toward him. Because the sage was a greatly powerful personality, he performed a sacrifice by offering oblations of sweet rice to Twastra. Text 28. Jesta Sresta Chaya Rajno Mahistinam Cha Bharata Namna Kritadyutis Tasye Yajno Nokistam Adad Dvija. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O Parikshit Maharaj, best of the Bharatas, the remnants of the food offered in the yajna were given by the great sage Angira to the first and foremost perfect among Chitraketu's millions of queens, whose name was Krita Duty. Text 29. Ataha nirpatim rajam bhavi taikas tavat maja harsha soka pradastubhyam iti brahma suyot yayahu. So let's try and do it together. Ata nirpatim rajam. You don't have... okay, anyway, we can...
Can we do it again?
how shall we do that?
Hare Krishna. Can we do it again?
Sorry. You were saying something, why?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Sorry,
Okay.
the speaker
Can we
was...
do it again?
Yes. Ata nirpatim rajam
Ata nirpatim rajan
bhavitaikas tavat maja
bhava takaistavat maja
harsha soka pradastubhyam
harsha shoka pradastubhyam
iti brahma suto yayo
iti brahma suto yayo
ataha nirpatim rajam
ata nirpatim rajan
bhavitaikas tavat maja
bhavitaistavat maja
harsha soka pradastubhyam
harsha shoka pradastubhyam
iti brahma suto yayo.
iti brahma suto yayo.
Okay, anybody wants to recite?
Excuse me. Ataha nirpatim rajam
Ataha nirpatim rajam
bhavitaikas tavat majaha
bhavitaikas tavat maja
Maja
harsha shoka pradastubhyam
harsha soka pradastubhyam
iti brahma suto yayo.
iti brahma suto yayo. Anyone else? Okay, Ata thereafter, Aha said, Nirpatim, unto the king, Rajan, O King Chitraketu, Bhavita, there will be Eka one, Tava your Atmaja son, Harsa Soka, jubilation and lamentation, Pradha, who will give, Tubhyam, unto you, Iti, thus, Brahmasutta, Angira Rishi, the son of Lord Brahma, Yayo left. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thereafter the great sage told the king, O great king, now you will have a son who will be the cause of both jubilation and lamentation. The sage then left without waiting for Chitraketu's response. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word harsha means jubilation and soka means lamentation. The king was overwhelmed with joy when he understood that he would have a son. Because of his great jubilation, he could not actually understand the statement of sage Angira. He accepted it to mean that there would certainly be jubilation because of the birth of his future son, but that he would be the king's only son, and being very proud of his great wealth and empire, would not be very obedient to his father. Thus the king was satisfied, thinking, let there be a son. It does not matter if he is not very obedient. In Bengal, there is a proverb that instead of having no maternal uncle, it is better to have a maternal uncle who is blind. The king accepted this philosophy, thinking that a disobedient son would be better than no son at all. The great sage Chanakya Pandit says, Ko ratha putrena jatena yona vidvan na dharmika kanena chakshusha kimva chakshu pideva kevalam. What is the use of a son who is neither a learned scholar nor a devotee? Such a son is like a blind, diseased eye, which always causes suffering. Nevertheless, the material world is so polluted that one wants to have a son even though he is useless. This attitude was represented in the history of King Chitraketu. Om Gyanatimrandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chukchumitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurube Namah Vancha Kalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Revacha Patita Nama Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhar Srivasti Gaur Bhakta Vrindai Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So yeah, we see very instructive verses coming from these chapter about Chitraketu, King Chitraketu's desire to have a son. So of course we understand from the Vedas that, or from the Bhagavatam for that matter, that bringing forth a child into the world, there's various conditions one needs to consider. How to take care of the child properly. Does one, is one situated to be able to raise the child in a God-conscious or Krishna-conscious way? And it is explained in many places in the Vedas that, unless one is able to liberate the child, one should not have children. So of course, then you can get into the technicalities of, should you even get married if there is no reason to have children? So of course, there's so many layers beneath that. But as devotees, we understand that Prabhupada gave us this process of Garbhodan Samskar, that when one, qualified couple is ready to conceive a child, that there is, certain purificatory processes that need to be followed in order to bring a child forth into the world who can be Krishna conscious, and also the consideration needs to be there that proper training needs to be given to this child so that the child can go back home, back to Godhead. So these are the responsibilities of the parents. So we see that there's many pastimes given in Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, of so many great saintly kings, who brought forth so many children. And this is, one typical scenario that King Chitraketu was lamenting, that even though, of course, these verses are explaining, unlike Krishna had 16,108 wives, it seems like King Chitraketu had many millions of wives. So, quite inconceivable, of course, in this age of Kali Yuga, to conceive, a person even having two wives, because, taking care of a family, is a great responsibility and not to be taken very lightly. So if one does not follow this Garbhodan Samskar purificatory processes, then, we get unwanted progeny being born in the world. And they just become a burden, not only to the parents, but to society at large. And, all sorts of misery results, from unwanted progeny. So this process of, bringing forth a child needs to be very, very carefully considered, especially in this age of Kali Yuga. So of course, we see in the context of these verses that we're reading, of course, King Chitraketu did not have, any lack of wealth, to be able to raise this child very, very nicely. And so his only lamentation was that he had no son. So again, the Vedic, in our Vedic tradition, the purpose of having a son is so that there's a few reasons given here, that number one, he should continue the family lineage. And of course, he then also has responsibility for performing different rites of passages for his ancestors. So particularly the Pitri Pinda Samskara, where one offers foodstuffs to the ancestors. So we see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, even Lord Chaitanya, had performed this Pinda ceremony on the banks of the river. And so this is another reason for having a son. Another reason is so that when these sacrifices are performed by the son, the understanding is that the ancestors will be able to get liberation, that moksha will be there for the ancestors. So that's another reason for performing, the son being able to perform these sacrifices for the benefit of the ancestors. And then, of course, the last point that the Vedic scriptures state is that, it is a social status thing, that having sons also signifies a man's social status and his position within the community. So having a son is very, very important for these reasons. And we see that, there's so many examples given of different kings, all of them were very, very desirous of having sons so that they can continue this tradition. So we read in previous chapters in the 6th canto here how Daksha, he was given the task of, populating the world. And he at first, we read, he had 10,000 sons. And, the idea was that they would generate more progeny and populate the world. But of course, we heard how Narad Muni had preached to the sons that, they were very, very advanced, performing so much of austerities already, just having been born, that he was able to send them back home, back to Godhead. So of course, we understood how Daksha was very, very upset. He gave birth to another 1,000 sons. And then, of course, again, Narad Muni preached to them, and all of them went back to Godhead. So our understanding from the Vedas is that this material world is a place of misery. And of course, as devotees, as we practice sadhana bhakti, as we read and understand the scriptures, we're always trying to analyze and see, is there a way out? Is there a way out? How can I be happy? But this idea of happiness and distress, there's so many verses showing how this material world is just a place of misery. And as far as happiness and distress is concerned, it's just our mind, concocting that one is good and one is bad. But both of them is not suitable, happiness or distress. It is explained in the Bhagavatam that happiness and distress only binds us to the body. So, as living entities, it is because of our attachment to this body that, we come up with these terms of happiness and distress. So, where was I? Sorry, one second. So there's one nice example given in the Bhagavatam. In dreams, we sometimes enjoy eating sweet rice and sometimes suffer as if one of our beloved family members has died. Because the same mind and body exist in the material world of duality, when we are awake, the so-called happiness and distress of this world are no better than the false, superficial happiness of dreams. The mind is the via medium, both in the dream state and in the wakeful state. And everything created by the mind in terms of acceptance and rejection is called a mental concoction. So, this idea of the mind, the Bhagavad Gita is very, very clear that, the living entity is bound by the laws of material nature. And because of these stringent laws of material nature, we are undergoing this material experience. But of course, the living entity pure soul is uncontaminated, and we're all given bodies according to our desires. And because of these desires, we're all in different bodies. Some are in human bodies, some are in animal bodies. But material nature has given us these bodies according to our guna and karma. So trying to extract, happiness out of this material world is a very, very foolish activity. And we find that we're all given our quota according to our karma. And so we should not endeavor to, even try to extract happiness. Of course, nobody is trying to extract pain or misery, unlike, the prayers of Queen Kunti, where, she was praying for calamities. But of course, her prayer was more in the mood of trying to remember Krishna. And this should be the goal of life, how to remember Krishna. So as far as, satisfying our own senses, all that will happen if we try to satisfy our own senses is we'll get more and more entangled in the material world. And so we don't want to satisfy our own senses. We should not be looking for, happiness in any form or in any way. The Vedas recommend, or the Srimad Bhagavatam recommends that we should try to dovetail, whatever propensities we have to try to satisfy Krishna's senses. And this is, the secret, how to satisfy Krishna's senses. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says that a devotee does not care about his own happiness and distress. He is simply interested in seeing that Krishna is happy. And for that purpose, he engages in various activities in the material world. Of course, we understand in the material world, we all have to work. So there's no question of us, sitting idle and not doing any activity. So we have to work. This was the advice, even Krishna gave to Arjuna, because Arjuna's plan initially, when the battle of Kurukshetra was going to take place, his idea was, I don't want to participate in any fighting. I don't want to see bloodshed. I don't want to see anybody being killed. Let me, I don't want a kingdom. Let me just go meditate in the forest. But, Krishna was explaining to Arjuna that, no, this is not, the proper mood. You're a Kshatriya, you have to fight. Everybody has to do some work, some activity. And being a Kshatriya, he has to fight. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is also explaining, if Krishna becomes happy by giving me distress, such a devotee accepts that unhappiness as the greatest of all happiness. Those who are materialistic, however, who are very proud of material wealth and have no spiritual knowledge, are like the Prakrita Sahajyas, regard their own happiness as the aim of life. But this will only create more bondage in the material world. And this idea of happiness and distress is the reason that, we're in this conditioned state. So we see that, of course, King Chitraketu, he was, so excited about being blessed, with having a son, that he completely misunderstood the sage Angira's message. When, Angira said, yes, you can have a son, but he will be the source of your, great happiness, but also distress. But because, he was so bewildered, in terms of a happy state, that he completely misunderstood what sage Angira was meaning. He thought it to mean that I'm going to have a son, and my son, will be disobedient. But, as Prabhupada was mentioning in the purport, let there be a son. It does not matter if he is not very obedient. And so Prabhupada quotes this verse, a Bengali proverb, that instead of having no maternal uncle, it is better to have a maternal uncle who is blind. And so the king, gladly accepted this bogus philosophy, so to speak. And so we see that when a son is born, there definitely is signs given in the environment even, of an auspicious birth or an inauspicious birth, occurring. And so we see in the case of Gandhari, when she gave birth to Duryodhan, of course, for some time she couldn't, conceive as well. And then she got some blessings from Vyasadeva that, she will have a son or have 100 sons. That was the blessing that Vyasadeva gave. But Gandhari was carrying her pregnancy for an unusually long time, it is explained. And of course, her mother-in-law, Ambika and Ambalika, were very, very upset. So, of course, after Pandu and Kunti had given birth, their first child, Yudhishthira, she was also, very, very envious in one sense. And so, because she wasn't giving birth, she started to bang her womb in frustration. And as a result, of this activity, a hardened mass of gray-colored flesh was issued from her womb. And so eventually she ends up going and asking Vyasadeva that, you said I'm going to give birth to 100 sons, you should make good on your promise or your blessings. And so, of course, Vyasadeva, he had divided, this mass of flesh into 100 pieces, put it in milk in pots, and one of the literatures explain that he had buried it in the earth for 2 more years. At the end of the second year, the first pot was opened and Duryodhan was born. But it's explained that when Duryodhan was born, there were many ill omens in the environment. And at that time, the sages had advised, Dhritarashtra to terminate, this son or these sons. But of course, by that time, Dhritarashtra was also very anxious, of having a lineage to the throne because, he didn't have any sons. And it was Queen Kunti that had, a son already. And so he was very, very desirous of, having a child. And so, he refused to terminate the birth of Duryodhan or the other sons. And of course, all of them had taken birth. And so we know, the result of, such an evil-minded son as Duryodhan and how, eventually it led to the fall of the Kurus because he was just so envious of the Pandavas. So as far as, taking birth in the material world, I was remembering the example of King Indra. At some point, he had been cursed to take birth as a hog. And of course, we've been reading the last few chapters, Indra has this tendency to, always get himself into trouble, doing so many inappropriate things, getting cursed by his spiritual master and so many things. So one such time he had, been cursed to become a hog. And in that example, he had taken birth as a hog and, he had baby hogs as well that, he was nicely taken care of. So this is King Indra, taking birth. But, when the pastime was up, I think it was Narad Muni that had requested that he come back, to his position as King Indra, but he had refused. He was so entangled in this activity of taking care of his babies and, material life, so to speak, that he didn't even want to resume his position as king of heaven. So this is how entangled we as living entities get in the material world, that even King Indra didn't want to resume his position as king of heaven. He had to be forcibly removed from the body so that, he could assume this post again. So the conclusion is that, we should all try to please the senses of Krishna that this should be the real acid test in everything that we do in our daily lives, day-to-day lives, that if we can, use the test, is this going to be pleasing to my spiritual master, pleasing to Krishna? And in that case, we should be able to act. Otherwise, every other action can cause further bondage for us. And of course, one can argue that, I just want to do good in the world. But we understand from the Bhagavatam that doing good in the world, opening up hospitals and, just doing philanthropic activities also will result in us taking another birth, because we'll have to have all that good karma come back unto us. So in this way, this cycle of birth and death will continue. But as devotees, we understand we want to stop this cycle of birth and death. We want to be able to go back home, back to Godhead, and serve Krishna. So this should be the goal of life, and not get caught up taking another birth. I had one more point, but I can't find it. Oh, in the 9th canto, there's an example given of King Yayati. And in this verse, it's explained, a son, well, there's different types, classes of sons that one has. A son who acts by anticipating what his father wants is a first-class son. One who acts upon receiving his father's order is a second-class son, and one who executes his father's order irreverently is a third-class son. But a son who refuses his father's order is like his father's stool. So in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining that Yayati's last son immediately accepted his father's proposal. For although he was the youngest, he was very qualified. Puru thought, I should have accepted my father's proposal before he asked, but I did not. Therefore, I am not a first-class son. I am a second-class son. But I do not wish to become the lowest type of son, who is compared to his father's stool. One Indian poet has spoken of Putra and Mutra. Putra means son and Mutra means urine. Both the son and urine come from the same genitals. If a son is an obedient devotee of the Lord, he is called Putra, or a real son. Otherwise, if he is not learned and he is not a devotee, a son is nothing better than urine. So the Bhagavatam is really heavy. We see also in the example of Vitrasura, we just read that in the previous chapters, about this demon Vitrasura. Of course, turns out he was such a great devotee of the Lord. But in the context of his engaging in this battle, we found that Vitrasura, when he was fighting the demigods on the battlefield, that at some point even all the demons had abandoned him and started to run away, retreat. And so in that case, we heard that the demigods, they were attacking the fleeing demons and killing them whilst they were fleeing. And so Vitrasura was chastising both the demons and the demigods for their actions in that context. That the demons, of course, they are warriors, and they should just continue fighting right to the end. So even if they die, it's no question of a warrior leaving the battlefield. It's very disgraceful for them to leave the battlefield. So he was chastising them, but then he was also chastising the demigods that it's not good, of course, also that you are killing these fleeing demons. So both parties he was recommending they should be able to lay down their lives whilst fighting. And in that context, Vitrasura was saying, both stool and a cowardly son come from the same abdomen of a mother. And Vitrasura said there is no difference between them. So very, very heavy verse. Again, in this context of Vitrasura, Chanakya Pandit was quoting the same verse he quoted, Prabhupada quoted here in this verse. What is the use of a son who is neither glorious nor devoted to the Lord? Such a son is like a blind eye, which simply gives pain, but cannot help one see. So that's all I had, I think, in relation to Chitraketu and his confusion about the birth of his son. So let us try to see how we can please Krishna's senses and not endeavor to look for happiness, because we'll just be very, very disappointed. We're all getting our own quota according to our karma of happiness and distress, and we should focus on pleasing Krishna's senses and not get caught up in my own happiness or distress, because we gave the example that it is both just like a dream that's occurring. Okay, today is also the disappearance of Madhavendra Puri. I want to read a little bit about that, but maybe we can take some questions and comments before we read about Srila Madhavendra Puri. Anyone has comments, questions?
No.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for class. And my only comment is welcome back home.
Hare Krishna. Thanks, Madhujamba. Glad to be back. Of course, it was a very rejuvenating experience being in Vrindavan. And you, Jane. Thank you. Yes, Dasya Prabhu. Yeah.
So the topic of happiness and distress, I heard some quotes about just how as devotees, we're looking for this spiritual taste, like taste is very essential. And I think the Maharaj, it was in the class on envy, and he was saying how, yeah, if we don't offend devotees, then we'll get the taste we're looking for. And he was saying we shouldn't kid ourselves in thinking that we don't want this taste, like, and that we don't need this taste in order to stay on this path. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little about like that taste versus material versus like this this concept of happiness and distress will come. So maybe it's a difference between material happiness and that spiritual taste. But yeah, just something on that.
Thank you. Yeah, my understanding is that we understand that the process in the stage is chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when we chant, of course, Krishna's names like this, then we're immediately on the transcendental platform, that there's no difference between Krishna and his name. And so the idea is that, we get transported immediately, by this sound vibration, in one sense, to the spiritual world. But the idea is, do we want to stay there, or do we, want to hear this Maha Mantra? The focus, emphasis is on hearing, Krishna's holy names. And so the question of taste is, hearing Krishna's name. When we are able to hear Krishna's name, then this spiritual taste will be there. Of course, people have tried before, or you can even try it yourself, just chanting Coca-Cola, 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 Coca-Cola is not going to give any taste. But when, we're in touch with this spiritual potency, which is, invested in Krishna's holy name, then this, taste or yearning for the satisfaction of our spirit soul, will be there. And so, as devotees, as we, continue to practice sadhana bhakti, then gradually, this material layers covering our heart will start to dissipate. And in this way, our real love for Krishna will become uncovered. Of course, there's so many rules and regulations that, one has to avoid, like you were saying, avoid offenses and so many things. So there's, a whole suite of do's and don'ts, but the focus and emphasis should be on, at least in this age, chanting Krishna's holy name. And of course, in the last few months, we've also been looking for cues or clues of, how to develop more of this taste. And some of the things we came up, I think, in previous classes was, let us all try to develop this 26 qualities of a devotee. And, gradually we'll be able to shed these layers of conditioning. So try to understand that the layers of conditioning, covering our heart, covering our real self, has been accumulating over unlimited lifetimes, not just one, not just two, not just 100 or 1,000,000. It's been over unlimited lifetimes. So in this way, the conditioning is really deep. But when we come into contact with a devotee, especially a pure devotee, then gradually, by that type of association, we can gradually start to shed these layers and experience glimpses initially of this real satisfaction of the spirit soul, real happiness of the spirit soul. Anybody else wants to share some insights on this ruchi, this taste, and how does that relate to this material happiness and distress? So yeah, I think the point is we shouldn't confuse material happiness and distress with spiritual happiness or distress. The idea is that spiritual happiness will satisfy the spirit soul, satisfy Krishna. But what we're experiencing in our day-to-day lives is just this material happiness and distress. So when we're in a kirtan, when we're associating with devotees, sharing the 6 loving exchanges of devotees, then we're getting glimpses of this spiritual taste and happiness that is rightfully ours. But of course, we're now all undergoing this material experience. So sometimes it's very difficult for us to see, what is real material happiness and what is spiritual happiness. But in the association of devotees, that's why we want to discuss and try to understand better what is what. That's my take on it. Anybody else wants to add some comments, questions, please?
Hare Krishna. Good morning, Dhruva Maharaj. Thank you as always for your class. It's always like deeper points when you speak on a topic. And this morning, with this story, what struck me was what my motivation is in serving Krishna. Am I truly trying to please Krishna's senses, or is there something else going on? And when you spoke of both of the kings, especially when you talked about Dhritarashtra, that am I serving out of fear or out of envy? Or am I really, and if I am, can I be honest enough to look at that? Because like you said, when we're chanting in our sadhana, the dust is being wiped off our hearts, and I'm going to see myself kind of, as that's happening, hopefully, I'm going to get a little bit of a view of what is really there. And it made me really look at it that way, because it's the first time that this pastime was gone over with me. It was with my spiritual master after the death of children. And the emphasis was, of course, on the fact that the transmigration of the soul, and that, further in the story what happens, but just that, a death is different than what I had been taught to perceive it as. But when you were talking this morning, I was like, wow, here's this king, and he seems to be doing well. I mean, his kingdom, he seems to be righteous. His kingdom's going pretty good, right? By all accounts and purposes. but yet he's unhappy out of this fear that if I don't have a son, you know, what's going to happen to my ancestors and to my forefathers and to me, and to the point where he couldn't really even kind of like do his job, you know, like honestly really do what he was supposed to be doing. So I really, and I think kind of relates to Dasha's question also, that, you know, how do we do that? How do we kind of really ask Krishna, I guess, to reveal to us what's really going on with us, you know, as we're serving and as we're chanting? And then if we see something like that, what should we do? You know, what should we do? I think it was really nice. He honestly asked the sage. He was honest about what was, you know, I'm fearful and this is what I want. And then also when Krishna, you know, if I have my allotment, I still want what I want, you know, like, and I think that's just a human thing, is that we still want it to, you know, I still want it to kind of go my way. It's like, this is lovely, but it could be better if, you know, and how do we address that as we advance in Krishna consciousness? So if you could speak a little bit about that. And thank you so much, because it really is making me revisit this whole thing in a different way. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yes, you know, I think, you know, you touched on it nicely, that, you know, Krishna consciousness is, and I say it all the time, that, you know, it's a deeply personal thing. That yes, externally, you know, I can seem to be a nice devotee, I can seem to be so many things, I can seem to be wearing a nice dhoti, wearing tilak, you know, doing so many external things. So superficially, but, you know, the real result is what's going on internally. What's my internal dialogue with Krishna? And, you know, in Vrindavan this year, we were very fortunate, somehow or the other. We met Braja Bihari Prabhu, Madananda Vrindavan's husband. He spends a lot of time in Govardhan. And I must say that, of course, I also had a theoretical understanding of Giriraj, you know, Govardhan Hill pastime, and, you know, how all of those things transpired, and Nanda Maharaj and Krishna's dialogue, you know, as a small child. And so, you know, I'd heard that so many times in my Krishna consciousnness that, you know, I was very familiar with the pastime. And of course, I'm aware that, you know, Govardhan Hill is also very, very special because provides, you know, so much of lush grasses, food for the cows, Rabi cows. And so, of course, you know, we've got cows. So, you know, this pastime is always there. But this time the experience was very, very different. You know, Rajabihari Prabhu does this nice meditation with devotees that, you know, come to Govardhan Hill. And he takes them to a small spot that has been allocated to the devotees on Govardhan Hill. The government has given them a small area there that they maintain and take care of. But in that meditation, he guides you through, you know, developing more of a relationship with Govardhan. And it was just mind-blowing that, you know, I'd heard this pastime so many times. But, you know, he takes us there and he asks us to introduce ourselves to Govardhan. So, you know, Govardhan Hill is there, and, you know, tell Govardhan about yourself, you know, what you do, why you do what you do, and, you know, just have a discussion with Govardhan. So, you know, it took me right out of my comfort zone. I generally, you know, don't introspect like that. But yeah, I started to, you know, share a few thoughts I was having with Govardhan. And, you know, by the end of the meditation, and, you know, he has various prompts throughout, you know, this interaction to, you know, guide you on in developing this relationship with Govardhan, that, you know, I came away from Govardhan thinking, wow, the personalities of Govardhan is so amazing. And then, you know, when you backfoot that with the pastime, it just becomes, you know, almost like an out-of-body experience in terms of the relationship with Govardhan. So in a similar way, you know, Krishna consciousness is a very, very deep process. And yeah, you know, this association of devotees trying to be Krishna conscious, you know, Prabhupada said we should be Krishna conscious 24 hours a day. And, you know, to my material mind, how is it possible? I'm sleeping for 12 hours or 16 hours a day. You know, how is it possible to be Krishna conscious? But it is possible. And we need to make the endeavor to, you know, constantly hear and chant in the association of devotees. So whatever activities we are doing, you know, we should be able to dovetail our propensities in Krishna's service. So, you know, the classic example, if you like to sing, then sing for the pleasure of the deities. So whatever we like to do, I'm an engineer, I like to construct, build things, do things, do it for the pleasure of Sri Radha Damodar and the cows. And so in this way, Prabhupada, there is one purport, I can't remember exactly which verse it is. But, there's this big question about mundane work, I'm going to a mundane job. But there's no such thing in one sense, as a mundane job. It just depends, what are you using your income for when you go to work? So all these activities can be so-called Krishnized. What is my mental dialogue when I'm, doing my work, whatever work it is. We can Krishnize all of our activities. And if we can successfully, do this most of the time, yes, we're not going to get it right all the time. We're living entities. So we're going to make, so many mistakes, but we should always, not let that thought slip from our mind that we should, recover from that and continue, thinking about Krishna and his name, form, pastimes, and activities. And in this way, we'll be making advancement. The question, of course, is there that, some devotees, we've always heard in different classes that, so many devotees sometimes chanting for, 15, 20, 30 years, and then suddenly they bloop. How does that happen? But, we can understand that, what was this person's internal dialogue in terms of his advancement in Krishna consciousness? Was he following the process given to us by Srila Prabhupada? And if he was, then advancement in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. It's, like Devamrita Maharaj says, it's like a lab experiment. Do the experiment. If you follow the guidelines, follow, the sequence, then you'll get the result. But if we are, not following the process, if we are cheating, trying to, take shortcuts, then in this way we won't get the result. What will be the result of taking these shortcuts? We'll get increasingly frustrated in our service. So, that's also a common question that we ask, why am I frustrated? Okay, let me quickly read. We got a few minutes left. Let me just quickly read a little bit about Srila Madhavendra Puri. Today is his disappearance day. Srila Madhavendra Puri. Srila Madhavendra Puri appeared in the 14th century. He was a guru of the Brahma or Madhva Sampradaya, one of our 4 bona fide Vaishnava lineages that purify the world in the age of Kali. Madhavendra Puri was the disciple of Lakshmi Pati Tirtha. Madhavendra Puri's disciples include Ishvara Puri, Advaita Acharya, Paramananda Puri, Ramananda Puri, Sri Rangapuri, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, Raghupati, Upadhyaya, and others. Nityananda Prabhu is said by some to be Madhavendra Puri's disciple. Others say that Lakshmi Pati was his guru, while the Prem Vilas states that it was Ishwari Puri's disciple. At the time of his departure from this world, Madhavendra Puri was completely absorbed in separation from Krishna and constantly repeated one sloka. This verse is considered by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas to be the essence of expression of the mood of separation. Somehow the verse didn't copy. Anyway, I'll find the verse just now. Madhavendra Puri was well-known sannyasi of the Madhva Sampradaya. He was the his grand disciple was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prior to his appearance, there was no evidence of Prema Bhakti in the Madhva line. Madhavendra Puri was the first shoot of the desire tree of divine love that came out of the Madhva lineage. Prior to his appearance, there was no sign of conjugal mood of devotion in the Madhva line. The feeling of separation from Krishna or transcendental vipralamba is the only practice by which the spiritual soul can achieve perfection. Okay, I'll send this pastime of Madhavendra Puri discovering Gopal on the group, so you can quickly read that pastime. Jai Shri Radha Damodar ki jai, Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Go Pramanande Hari Hari Bol.